Okay, here we go.
Are you going to say good afternoon, mate? You've been live for about 10 seconds. Hello, everybody.
This is what happens. This is what happens when a boss asks you at last minute, can you, Chris, would you mind jumping in and hosting? And it looks as though everything's working, and then I get a pop-up message that I've got to read to determine whether or not we're good to go. Now, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Wednesday's Acsom. As you can tell, I'm not Paul John Dykes, quite obviously, but I am delighted today to be joined by Big John Yogi Hughes on a Wednesday, which is always great. I usually enjoy watching these, but today I get to join the big man in the hot seat. I'm obviously Chris McAway in double denim, although I'm not sporting that today. John, I would ask you how you're doing, but the last time I was on a Wednesday, you made me sign a non-disclosure agreement. So, but no, I hope you're doing well, sir. First of all, before we do anything, I do have an apology to make, and the apology is to Paddy Lavery. Now, for those of you who don't know, we use a platform here to try and get the stream set up, and we can see the comments coming in, and we try and this is why it can sometimes be so difficult to capture all the comments. We see the comments coming in one at a time, and what you can do is you can look at certain ones, you can either bring them up at the time, or you can start the comments so that you can come back to them at a later point. And one particular comment I was trying to start, and the comment was from a certain Paddy Lavery. However, me being a little bit footery with this old pen, I actually put Paddy in a timeout, which essentially means I banned him from the platform. However, I did reach out to Paul John, and Paul John's managed to undo it after I pleaded to him. So, Paddy, if you're listening, sir, it was meant in the best of intentions, and I apologise, but you should be back on now. So,
anyway. I would just point out to folks, I still can't see comments because yet again I left my podcast here.
I know.
So, unfortunately, folks, I'll have to rely on Chris to tell me what you're shouting at me about.
That's a risk. So, yeah. Anyway, this could be the final time that Paul John asks us to step in. So, anyway, hope everyone's well. Sadly, it would be nice to be talking about another new signing, John, but it's another day where we are waiting on tenterhooks for the next bit of news to come out for the club. One bit of news that has come out from the club is that the financial performance is better than expected. But from a supporter standpoint, as great as that is obviously to hear about the club, we're still in this position where we are evidently weaker as a squad than we were when we finished the season last. And I think, as we now approach the European, the first game in Europe, is it time we start getting squeaky bum, do you think?
Yeah. You have to go with the preponderance of evidence. So I'm not, I've said all along, I'll not, we're not going into full panic mode until the last day, but we've seen it that many times. How many times have we said that, as a matter of fact? Oh, you've got to wait until the very last day, and then how many times have we just been, oh, well, that was a disaster. So, we need to sign, at last count, I think, round about 5 players. Whether you think we need 2 strikers or 1 striker, or whether you think we need 1 in midfield, left back, left centre back, a winger. We need to sign a lot of players, and we need to get rid of a lot of players. And there's nowhere near enough. We're not even linked to rumours. Do you know what I mean? There's no rumours even.
No.
Which is fairly telling. It means there's no noise coming out. And one of the things that really concerned me was I was told by someone who has sources within the club, good sources, someone who writes for a living, and he was told that that Kasper Schmeichel deal had been ongoing for months. Right. So in retrospect, what that looks like to me is that his source wasn't wrong. That's what his source had been told, but it means that people and maybe other departments in the club are trying to make it look like the managers had a full handle on this for the whole time. Because that's not what it was, clearly from Schmeichel's comments, and he's got no reason to lie. Why would he? He wasn't even contacted until after the Euros. So that's really disturbing, especially given how early Joe Hart put his cards down. So yeah, I'm not confident at all. And as we said, last week, we've got maybe one guy doing the recruitment. Brendan's talking about how hard people are working behind the scenes. Well, no wonder there's working hard if there's only one of them. If it's your man Jay Lefebvre, and that's basically it, because Brendan's out at the training, and there's one guy basically doing global recruitment for us. Is it any wonder it's quiet? So, and the given that impression, Brendan's talking about, he doesn't want to get in, he doesn't want the fans creating like a toxic atmosphere, and that's fine. But he's also said then he's not sending messages to the board by what he's doing. He's denying he's trying to throw Michael Nicholson under the bus by making certain comments, and all of that's great. But what it does mean then is, and this is another thing I've been told, is that Brendan is 100% in charge of what's happening. Now, if I was Brendan, I'd be very grateful for the fact that we're off to a flyer of a start and we've had a fantastic pre-season and the guys are playing well. So if that was going a different way and this window closed and we've been badly let down again, I'd say Brendan, the people that don't like Brendan would be back out in force.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot at stake. There's a lot of, regardless of what he said, there's politics being played as well. Nobody's going to want to take the hit if this goes wrong. But, if you're asking me, am I sceptical? When was the last time we brought in 5 first-team starters in 3 weeks?
Yeah.
I think if you'll find that was never. Absolutely never.
Yeah, I can't think of a time, John, where we actually brought in even, I think, more than 3 players that tangibly improved the squad, as in went straight into the first team. I can't think of a time when we last did that. I think you talk about Carter Vickers and Jota, and potentially across the same season we brought in, Kyogo, so you can maybe point back to that. But that was, that was a couple of years ago now. So, yeah, I think it's to look at the 5 positions where I think we need to strengthen. I mean, striker's an obvious one, right? We need a striker there. The penalty that wasn't given during the game, and we'll come to talk about the match, but the penalty that wasn't given for me was more disturbing for the fact that it could have resulted in an injury to our one and only established striker. And I'm not at the position where I'm willing to buy into Mikey Johnson becoming the second or third choice striker at this point, as decent a pre-season as he's had. Maeda's obviously injured, who might have been an option to slot in as an auxiliary striker, but at the moment he's still very much, I think, one of our 2 established left wingers. So you're not really wanting to start looking at Maeda to be that solution. So, and we've been linked with Ida for so long now. Looks like both player and club have the appetite to bring the player in, but it's the delay, it's the seeming dragging the heels. And there was something that Brendan said in one of his interviews, which was quite telling for me. He used the word snooze. He used the word snooze in one of his interviews. And I think, when you start hearing any manager, but especially Brendan, given what's happened previously, using terms like snooze, toxic, these are terms that throw up alarm bells for me. I start to get a bit nervous about, well, how much can we read into these comments? Is there some sort of subliminal message coming through here in these comments, or are we just being too cynical? I want to bring up a couple of comments which I think are quite relevant to this. First of all, I'll bring up Patrick. Just say afternoon, comrades. Afternoon, Patrick. Good to have you. Jungle, why are Celtic holding back with all their money? Has to be a reason. I also like the second point here. We keep hearing the need for money for a rainy day. What's a rainy day? And then winning the league, we have to be more streetwise than that. And I look, we're all grateful for the fact we've got a very financially secure club, and we are, we will continually lord that over the team over the other side. But we are standing still on the pitch, and I think that's and it's why are we doing that? What is the point of accumulating all this wonderful revenue if we're not going to invest it on the park? So it's frustrating. It's frustrating because, and we know there's a lot of moving parts. We know there's a lot of moving parts to transfers. One club needs to bring in a replacement player. That player they're trying to buy, they've got the same issue as that club, and so on and so forth. but we've had so much time knowing that there's reinforcements required. Surely we would have had a short list of 1, 2, 3, 4 players, and even first choice, maybe second choice, maybe third choice if we can't get the first two over the line. But at the moment, it seems like radio silence. There's nothing.
Well, I mean, there's always wishful thinking, and we do at pretty much every transfer window project our own feelings onto the situation, because to us things that seem entirely reasonable, like having more than one striker, having more than one left back, stuff like that, which you would think reasonable, but apparently, other people don't agree. This is a high-risk strategy at this point. We've got 3 weeks, and we have at least 2 positions in which we could be bang in trouble immediately. Because there are going to be injuries, there is going to be wear and tear, there are going to be dips in form. All of that happens during a season, and we're already risking, putting the season at risk by starting the season and potentially going 4 weeks without these backups or these first team starters ready to play, because we don't have any fallback. So I think based on what Brendan said last year, he maybe thinks Scales can play in left back. I wouldn't want to see that at all. I mean, he's so different, from Taylor. He wouldn't offer you really anything from that sort of attacking point of view. Apart from his headers, obviously, corners. But do you know what I mean in terms of building play? Down that left and creatively, Taylor was very, very good at that. You can't ask a guy just go into a position he hasn't played for a couple of years and be excellent at it. Maybe he could cover it at a push, but it'd be literally that. It'd be covering it. It wouldn't be. We're not going to be improving the team by having him as an emergency left back. And we're not going to be improving the team by having a Maeda or Mikey Johnson as emergency strikers. It's already a high-risk strategy. And I was listening to Liam during the week there, and he was talking about what he would do is walk away from Ida and then come back in on the final day and offer them, the same money and basically say, take it or leave it, which is fine. That sort of brinksmanship can be a very good idea, but only if you have a fullback position.
Yes.
We don't have a fullback position. I don't think. I'd be surprised if we're looking. I mean, people are going on about Miovski. Miovski's got multiple offers in for him now. No mention of us moving for him.
Nope.
So we could easily be left with no Ida, no Miovski, no other options, and Kyogo 1 trip away from a dodgy shoulder. And Kyogo takes a lot of abuse. He's so quick. He was clattered a couple of times at the weekend. And when he's playing like that, when he's on fire like that, guys are always leaving a leg in or trying to grab him or put him backwards. Or in the case of the goalie, just going straight through him. But it really is very, very risky what we're doing here. And, there is no evidence in the past to support the contention, essentially, that we are going to deliver serious quality to this first team before the end of this transfer window. And you've already heard people start talking about multiple transfer windows, which is what they were talking about at the start of last year when Brendan first came in, where you can't get it done and all the rest of it. And as to the point, and I addressed it last week as well, it's really difficult to do. Yeah, and that's why you're paid £3 million a year. And that's why Neto Nicholson's paid £1 million a year. It's difficult. It's and so there's a value in your compensation package, which means that essentially excuses for being unable to do this are not acceptable. If you can't do it, don't take the money and go away and get a job doing something where there's no expectations of you.
Yeah.
It's not acceptable to say, well, we can't do it, it's dead difficult. Especially when we're currently sitting with dragons and a pile of mountains, a mountain of rubies and gold, and just sitting there admiring how shiny the mountain is and never moving off it to do anything. You know, as you say, it's immensely frustrating. There can be things going on behind the scenes. There can be things that we're misinterpreting. I don't deny that. For instance, I mean, I did think that the reason for everyone was getting a 5-year deal at one point was a complete change in how we were looking at players and valuing players for the future. And it was good business, tying them down long term and all the rest of it. And in retrospect, that's not what that's about at all. That is about amortization over the longest possible term. That's about financial fair play, or financial sustainability rules as they are now, and trying to basically break that down over the longest possible time. And 5 years is now the longest possible time. Chelsea were doing it over 8 years and things like that, and that's been disallowed now. But so you can misinterpret that, but you're usually misinterpreting that in a good way. You're thinking, oh, this is really a great initiative. Because the first thing you're thinking is, you want to think is, the club are taking the bull by the horns, and this is something new we're seeing. It's a new approach we're seeing. This is great to see how we're managing players. It has its risks. I mean, we discussed the risks of having players on long-term contracts as well, especially when a lot of them turn out to be flops, as they have done recently. So you can't get them out the door, and this is part of what we're seeing now. But it was nothing to do with that. It's all to do with the accounts. So I mean, it's still clever. You still have to, we want to be able to spend as much as possible, but we're nowhere near breaching any financial sustainability rules. So you could have given every one of those guys a 1-year contract, jacked all the money into the first year. You still wouldn't have touched the sides of what we could spend. 70% of revenue next year, 80% this year. We're not within 100 miles of touching that. And so, that's clever for clever's sake, and that's grand. What happens? So we need to be within the rules. That's grand, but at least get to the point where we've actually got. I was talking about a spend of a net. I wanted to see a net 30 million spend. We'll be lucky if we've spent any money. I mean, this is going, at all. We'll have a gross. We're going to make money out this transfer window, and we're going to be left with a squad about half the squad we had last year if things don't get turned around very quickly. And yes, of course, there's always going to be last-minute signings, and that's great. There'll be last-minute signings, and that's fine. But they better be, because at that point you've got no fallback. So if you don't get them at the last minute, if something doesn't come in at the last minute, you've got nothing. And we're left in a precarious situation with a squad, a first 11 that looks great, and as soon as you start picking away at it, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a problem, right? They've not indentured any trust in recent years. We've got no precedent that tells us that everything's going to be okay, because they've never really delivered on that expectation, certainly in recent, as you say, recent years. And as Paddy's comment alluded to there's no point glorifying how financially, well off we are at the moment, because all that's doing is enhancing the expectations of the supporters to say, well, we've got money. All right, guys, great, you've got money, fantastic, that's half the job. Now go and utilise that money, and they're not doing it. Obviously, this is the frustration that everybody's feeling at the moment. So don't want to keep on with the negativity as much as it's easy to get drawn into that. We did have our first game of the season, following on from a draw from our nearest rivals, which was great. So we're already up and running in the season. We've got a couple of points of a lead. And to be fair, on the park at the moment, domestically, we do look head and shoulders above both Rangers and certainly the team we played in Kilmarnock. What was your thoughts on the match, Big John? What stood out for you?
That was great. Yeah, I mean, obviously they had a couple of fullbacks out, but I thought it was great, and a real marked improvement. I mean, you can see the improvement. You can see the job that Brendan's doing. So he's good at least 50% of his job. I'll give him that. I mean, they're playing really well. I mean, Matt O'Reilly's playing with the swagger of a French pole vaulter, isn't he? So and you've got the likes of Hatate, who is just looks a different player. I mean, remarkable. He's just, you're not seeing the glory passes at all, but his general passing is fabulous. It is quick and accurate. He does it with pace. It's really top notch. I mean, Hatate, I don't want to say he's like a new signing because that will just but he certainly has improved, markedly improved, and it really is benefiting the team. Matt O'Reilly's playing phenomenally well. Callum McGregor looks very refreshed and is driving the team. I mean, the midfield at the moment looks brilliant. I really want to see that midfield this season. I'd be gutted if that's broken up, and that's the big issue, isn't it?
I think that's adding to the fears. Yeah, that's adding to the fears, isn't it? Because we saw how effective that that midfield trio, in addition to the link-up play with Kyogo, which I thought was excellent. I really liked while McGregor went about his business and done his job, and actually it didn't look as though he was under quite as much pressure during the match. I thought McGregor kind of coasted the game and was actually getting forward quite a bit and contributing. But it was the interplay between Hatate, O'Reilly, and Kyogo that really impressed me, and actually sums up their importance to this style of play. Now, we know Matt O'Reilly's been linked with multiple clubs, so there's an expectation that he's, probably a fear more than an expectation that he may not be with us by the time the window closes. And that's going to be an incredibly difficult player to replace. But then you've got Hatate, who comes in. Okay, it's one game, it's against Kilmarnock, who didn't really show a huge amount of ambition in the game. But you're already seeing the part that he could potentially play in the upcoming season if we manage to hold on to him. So you think about if those two players are potentially targets for teams and we end up getting offers that we can't refuse, although I think we should be refusing, but if we get offers that the club either can't or won't refuse for both those players, your recruitment job becomes, I think, at least twice as hard as it currently is. Because not only are we even more, even weaker than we have been at this point in the season, but you've got two players that you cannot and will not be able to replace with projects. You just simply will not be able to do it. We have the occasional luck with projects. Matt O'Reilly's a good example, but those are rare occasions, and the ratio of successes versus failures when it comes to project signing is so unbalanced towards failure. It really is. And I think, this is where you wonder what message the manager is conveying to not only his recruitment team, and by recruitment team, as we said, it's like one guy, and to the board to say, look, if you allow me to keep Matt O'Reilly and Hatate, great, takes a little bit of pressure off, and then we're augmenting some of the positions. But if you lose those two, one or both of those players, I think we are markedly weaker, not just for Europe, but domestically as well, because they were so effective in that game against Kilmarnock. And you look at who's going to come in. Young Kelly's playing in the B team again and barely getting a look at.
But you say we cannot replace them with project players, but we can, and we will. Right? Based on previous experience, so that's exactly what we'll do. Because first of all, it'll probably be too late, and secondly, to replace someone. Someone's about to pay 25, 30, 35 million for Matt O'Reilly if we're going to take him. Are we going to spend that? Not in a month of Sundays. Or we wouldn't even spend that in the entire team. So the idea, the notion that we're going to replace him with someone of equal quality is just fanciful, because we definitely will not. So yes, we are going to be weaker if that happens, and it probably will happen late in the window, and the likes of Brighton line and stuff up. But I said before, last week or the week before, that I think for Matt O'Reilly it needs to be the right offer to the club, and it needs to be the right club for him. So, despite the fact, I think the board would be pushing pretty hard to get him out the door if it was 30, 35 million. I don't think the manager would be pushing. Because he knows what Matt O'Reilly is worth. So there's going to be a bit of friction there, and it's all just going to come down to whether he wants to make that intermediate step. But I don't think he needs to make an intermediate step. I think he can step right up to the higher levels of England or anywhere else for that matter, because he's that good. And to lose him, but bear in mind, this is a man now. Hatate, as I say, is looking excellent at the moment, but Matt O'Reilly was responsible for so much last year of our creativity. He was like the guy. I mean, the number of assists and all the creativity in the team was focused on him. He was the guy that was making things happen. And to lose him, Atate's going to have to really have a big step up then. But they're different kinds of players as well. It's not.
Yeah, they
He's not that kind of player.
Yeah.
I'm just glad that Hatate, because Hatate's big issue was he created massive danger for us in transition because he lost the ball in dangerous situations, and we were exposed on the left because we're already not great on the left, especially at European level. Greg Taylor, for all the facts, he's a good player. We know at European level he has limitations, and you can say the same for Scales as well. I genuinely don't think Scales is going to get replaced at all. I'm not even sure they're looking. It wouldn't surprise me if we just go with Carter, Vickers, Scales, and Welsh as backup. I think that's it. I'm not even sure we're looking. The manager likes him and he's playing well. When he has a game like he had at the weekend, the manager will move on to other things that are more pressing. I think that we're playing very, very well. Let's be honest, we had a fantastic pre-season. That was the most fun I've had watching a pre-season in a long, long time. It was great to see. It wasn't. I remember when Ange came in, and we didn't have a squad, and it was basically just like a whole load of boys from the youth team and the B team and stuff like that, and you're just waiting for a signing or two to come in just to make up the numbers. Never mind. I mean, that's how we ended up with James McCarthy. You're literally making up numbers and giving anyone a contract that could pull the boots on for the first team. We're a long way from that in terms of we have the bones of a great team. But I think this is going to kind of drive people nuts. Because if we're playing as well as that, and we have no issues, never mind augmenting the team, we have big holes to fill in terms of like striker and left back. Never mind making the team better. That's just to stop us dropping off a cliff at some point this season when people are injured.
Absolutely.
So, if we're looking, the frustration of not augmenting and not improving a team that looks like it could really do some damage. I think the fans will be absolutely, furious if that's the way it pans out, because we look as if we could push on here. We look as if we could do something in Europe. If we can keep Matt O'Reilly and fill those positions, add a bit of quality. We're going to take a couple of teams down in Europe. There's no question in my mind that we will win some games in Europe. It would be a hell of a shame if it all just didn't happen, if it became a thing that we talked about in years to come. Do you remember we could have pushed on from there, but that transfer window was a disaster, we end up with guys who are last minute filler and boys on loan, to cover, to be stopgap cover, and that's not what we need.
No.
I'm bracing myself, to be honest. I'm just bracing myself to be disappointed. I very much hope I am badly, badly wrong about how this is going to turn out. But the evidence, it's the same reason I said in the January window, nothing's going to happen. Right? Everyone wanted like 10 players signed. I said it's not going to happen, and it's not going to happen because it's the same people in charge. So Long was still there, and it was the same people in charge, same approach. You knew it wasn't going to happen, and then we ended up getting eventually Kuhn looks a player now he looked like one of the worst players I've ever seen when he came in. He looks a player now. And Adam Ida was very much, you talk about how the scouting has been done. You can't wait for people to phone the manager. Like his representatives phoned the manager and was basically like, "You used to like this boy when he was a kid. Do you want to sign him?" And absolutely, he did. And thank God he did, because it was so important.
And Danielle makes a point on that. She references under Ange how proactive we were. We knew Juranovic was going off to Union Berlin, and we had his replacement in before Juranovic was even out, in terms of AJ. And that's the sort of planning that she feels we need this summer. I completely agree with that. I think that's part of the issue, is that it's no secret what we've needed to do with this team. And you're right, you talk about the same people in charge. That's the consistent factor. But it's like, I spoke on a pod a few days back, a few weeks back rather, and the one thing for me is, when we've got a first 11 at the moment, that I think when we're playing domestically, we're on the front foot, we'll probably go and beat everyone. Injuries aside, we'll probably beat every team in the league. And I mean that, without sounding arrogant about it, we've just got the requisite quality to do that in comparison to the other teams. Still need the players to be on it, obviously. Europe's a different kettle of fish. But the one thing that's been evident throughout even the last couple of seasons is that when things are going fine, we're great. We can, play our style of football. We can win games. We can dominate games. We can get goals. What we've never had is the plan B. How do we address games where we're under the cosh? And that's what we're going to see in Europe more often than not. Now, you talk about a player like, for example, Greg Taylor. Greg Taylor, as we saw again at the weekend, really good going forward, can contribute with assists, good passing, works hard. Does a decent job in that left back position. But it's most notable when we're going forward. But when we are under the cosh, when we're getting maybe high cross balls coming in, really quality crosses coming in from a top winger, which we're likely to face in Europe, Greg Taylor is vulnerable at that left-hand side. And we know he doesn't necessarily get the right level of support from the left-sided centre-back, which at the moment is Scales. So what's our plan B option there, right? Because we know Scales is not, he's not to the same level as Carter Vickers defensively. As good as he's started the season, and he's definitely a player that's continuing to improve, he's not a player of Carter Vickers' quality. So who's the plan B for Scales, and who's the plan B for Taylor, for example? And this is something we've been speaking about for the best part of like two years. You talk about striker. Kyogo is a phenomenal player. He's a phenomenal striker, great intelligent movement, but he plays a certain style, and he plays a certain way. And it works best when he can find those pockets in behind, when he can link up with other players. When we played Kilmarnock for most of the occasions last year, it wasn't really working. Now, I know Kyogo's just played and played really well against Kilmarnock this season, so hopefully we've tweaked the tactics to accommodate. But Ida came in and was very effective in that last game we played against Kilmarnock because he offered something different. It was a plan B. We were able to change it up and use the personnel to address the deficiencies that we'd had up to that point. Now, if we can all see that and talk about that as fans, and you like to think, well, surely the manager's seen that, why are we in a position where we don't even have that same plan B that we had with Ida? We've never had a decent replacement for Greg Taylor. I mean, Bernabei is, let's know he who shall not be named from this point forward. But we need somebody, or we personnel that can come in and can actually allow us to manage games where the plan A isn't working and gets us over the line.
Well, we don't have that at the moment. Obviously, we don't have enough bodies. You can't even complain about how the plan B is not that effective because there isn't one.
Yeah.
Right. Now, fortunately, Kyogo is, but he is more effective at the moment because it looks like we are much faster.
Yeah.
The speed of pass is much faster. The movement is better, and overall accuracy and getting the ball forward. We're much faster than we were, which is why Kyogo is looking like his old self, because we are finding him in that space, and he's able to make space and find space because moving the ball faster means there is space, So, Kyogo's looking great, but again, we can't even complain about, how does Ida, measure up against Giacomakis or anything like that. We don't have anyone, and we don't know who we're going to get. And the issues with Greg Taylor, I don't know. I mean, it's like, Danny McGrain was on the pitch doing the draw. You're wondering if he'd put his boots back on. But with Greg, and it's not his fault, and it's not particularly with him to do with his play as such, but athletically, he can't cope in Europe against teams who are more accurate, get the ball into the back post, and everyone's big, everyone's athletic, everyone's mobile, and they just monster you. Excuse me. And so, he can't defend that back post, and the problem is Liam Scales isn't, great at defending that back post either. So we have issues on that side, and those are the same issues we had. It sounds like we're just like a review of last season, because nothing has fundamentally changed, apart from the fact we've got weaker. If the guys, the guys are playing well, thankfully, and really well, and give the manager credit for that as well. Give the players credit for changing their approach, and they look brilliant. But the squad is objectively weaker.
Yeah.
And we're about to go into yet another. And you're talking about you think we're going to canter this season. Well, I'll tell you what. If the boys across the city there, if they qualify for the Champions League, right? What do you think they're going to do with that money? Because have they, apart from build a stadium? Sorry, but they're going to take a massive chunk of that money and throw it at the team, because that's what they've always done. They live beyond their means. That's what they've always done. Now they'll have challenges under those same financial sustainability regulations, but they will throw as much as they possibly can at the team. And until the towards the end of last year, we weren't miles away from them. That was a proper time challenge. So just to assume that if we stay the same, and then there's multiple options here. We can keep Matt O'Reilly. We can add a couple of players. We can have a fantastic season. We can lose Matt O'Reilly at the death, maybe about half replace him. Bring in some strength elsewhere and have a decent season. We can lose Matt O'Reilly at the death. We can not replace him, and we cannot find replacements elsewhere either. And we're not, that's going to be bad, really, really bad. So there are multiple things that can happen here. To me, my fear is that we lose Matt O'Reilly because he's too good a player, I think, for people not to come in. Because once it's getting down to the wire here, there are a lot of teams going, look, we need to make decisive moves. There's hundreds of millions at stake, whatever, it is in those leagues, and we need to make decisive moves. And we're willing to spend stupid money for, look, if Matt O'Reilly was already an EPL player, they'd be throwing 60 million at him.
Oh, easily.
Yeah. It's at least, because look at some of the players that have moved for, absolutely ridiculous. I mean, Nat Phillips, as we mentioned the other week, is going for 8 million. They want for, it's an absolute joke. So Matt O'Reilly, it's worth a lot of money, and people will want him because he's going to be in demand. My fear is we lose him too late to do much about it, and we only bring in stopgaps in the, so we bring in like another stopgap winger. We bring in.
Yep. Nope. We may have lost Big John. Yeah.
Sorry, mate.
You're right. You're back.
That's actually. This is what happens when they're on the phone. I actually got a phone call, so I do apologise.
I didn't do a Paddy Lavery on you, and I didn't. I
don't know. Can you hear me? Okay, mate.
We can hear you. We can hear you, mate. We've got you.
Okay. I can't hear you at all.
Oh, you can't hear me? Oh, brilliant. Okay. Well, in that case, I'll let you try and get that fixed. We'll continue on. So I think to John's point there, and I'll bring up a few comments in a moment. But yeah, it is the case of where we have the first European game coming up. We have a bunch of domestic games until we get there. But here's a question for everyone in the comments. If we get to our first European game with the current team and squad that we have, right, assuming we've managed to keep Matt O'Reilly and we keep Hatate and we don't lose any other players, but let's say we get to the first European game with the current first team and the current squad, and we win that European game, and then we go on a bit of a run in Europe, does that alleviate the frustrations? Does that then say, you know what, the manager had something here? Or do we still see it that we are one injury or, you know, one bad performance away from, we blew this, we absolutely didn't take our chance, and we blew this? Big John will try and join us when he comes back. So there's a point to the comments. What's the minimum expectation for getting to our first European game? Let's see if I can bring Big John back in.
Sorry about that, mate.
No, I can hear you. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I've got you now. That's what
So I just put a point.
The daughter on the phone. She shall be severely rebuked.
Terrible. You can't get the stuff these days. It's terrible. No, that's fine. I just put a point out to the comments to say, is there a scenario whereby we get to our first European game with the current squad, no additional signings, with the current squad, fully fit, current squad, and let's say we win our first game? Does that alleviate some of our fears? Do we think actually maybe this squad's better than what we thought it is? The manager knows what he's working with, he's got better insight than us? Or are we still that one injury or that one bad performance away from we blew our opportunity? So I just put that out to the comments. See what you think. What's your thoughts? I mean, is there a scenario where we don't see any changes, don't see any movements, either incomings or outgoings, and we get to that first game in September?
Yeah, very clearly there is.
Yeah.
And you're looking at, you know, the worst thing that happens then is there's injuries in key positions, because the squad is paper thin. You know, so we have, you know, even when you look at the numbers, there's also non-contributors, you know. So we've got like 8 midfielders, 2 of them don't play. We've got like, you know, 6 wingers, 3 of them don't play. You know, so even with the bodies in the squad, the quality of the squad isn't there in depth. So we, you know, as I say, we have an excellent first 11, all being well and everyone being fit. Yep. But how often do you get to put out your first 11? You know, so there are definitely there are multiple issues to contend with here, and we also need to get. I mean, there's a whole load of those guys that need to get out the door. You know, those non-contributors. We really need to get shot of them, and it doesn't look as if there's enough movement on that front either. So we have multiple issues here, and you know, it's the manager. I mean, I don't envy them. You know, they have a big job in their hands, but that's why you get paid the big bucks, and it's you know, it's simply not good enough. You know, if things carry on the way they're going, it's not good enough. I'm not optimistic at this point. I was optimistic at the start of the window, because foolishly I thought with all that money, you know, and Brendan calling the shots, that we'd have rattled through some players at this point, and it is just not the case. So, you know, you can imagine, you know, as I said, we're going to have some competition if we don't do anything. If we lose Matt O'Reilly, even this year, we're going to have some competition domestically if they hit the Champions League. So, it's you know, there are any number of ways that this can play out. But, you know, I'm still looking forward to what we could be, right? I know that I'm going to almost certainly end up deeply frustrated, but
I still, I'm not optimistic, but I am looking forward to what we could be with this team, because it could be special. It could be a great year. If the manager, Michael Nicholson, pull this out the bag, we could potentially have a sensational year.
Absolutely, and I share that. I share that frustration, or at least the expectation that I'll be frustrated by the end of the window. I should clarify that point I made is not something I want to see happen. I'm just thinking about the point of, even if we go in there, we win our first game, having got through an entire window without improving the team or the squads, I think for me is a travesty. No matter how good we play domestically or play in Europe, I think it would be such a grossly missed opportunity that it would be hard for the board's recruitment, and to an extent even the manager to depending on how transparent he is about the process and his frustrations, to get the fans back on side. I think at the moment, if Brendan was to come out and say, look, I can't work with this board, I'm not getting the targets I want, I can't take the team any further because I'm getting too many restrictions put on me. I think if that was ever to come out, whether within the job or if he leaves for any reason, the fans would be more sympathetic to that, because we have our eyes pointed squarely at the board and squarely at the recruitment process as being at the core of the problem. But I think if Brendan comes out at the end of the window and, let's say we've not improved, and says, I'm happy with what we've got, I'm quite prepared to take this team into Europe, I've got faith in these guys, and get through results. Suddenly does the scrutiny start to turn on Brendan and say, well, actually, hang on, are you doing enough to influence this process? Are you digging your heels in enough? Are you fighting against these elements? And I think that's that I think would maybe change fan opinion, and I think he would lose some of the faith that he built up over the course of last season.
Well, he absolutely would, and that's what I was saying earlier on. He should be grateful that we're playing well, and I'm glad he's done a good job from that point of view. But he is ultimately he's the man in charge of the football department, and if he doesn't want to throw Nicholson or anyone else under the bus, then we have to assume that he was given full charge, and he has not done the job. So if that's the way it pans out, so Michael Nicholson will take some heat, but we have to, Brendan takes just as much, if not more, because we can't, he's either not pushing hard enough. I mean, do we really believe he's just given them a list of names, and the only problem is that Michael Nicholson can't get those deals over the line? I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. I think there's more to it than that. I don't think we're either looking at the wrong people or not enough people, or if we don't have our first choice left back, why haven't we signed the second choice? Why haven't we signed the third choice? Why haven't we signed the fourth choice? And there shouldn't be, massive differences between the quality of those players. Yeah. Your first choice shouldn't be like, someone that's playing for Barcelona, and the next guy is the guy that's playing for Acsom. There shouldn't be a difference like that. So we have, the manager has to hold his hand up here. People will not be happy, because what's going to happen is, if we don't strengthen in this window, then the injuries will start to happen. Dips in form will start to happen. And then all of a sudden you've got nothing, and you're falling back to youth team players. And so, I mean, it's a risk. It's a really, really, right now there's about 3 weeks to go, and it's a massively risky strategy. And I would also point out that the one thing that's not affected by the financial sustainability regulations is you can spend whatever you want on your football department in terms of recruitment and scouting.
Yes.
Right? Because it's only the coach and the players and the transfer fees and the wages and all that fall into that.
Yep.
Not the wages of the people in the football department, right? So you can have director of football, you can have 20 global scouts all on full-time wages. You could have as big a department there as you want, and it doesn't impact on financial sustainability. But my goodness, it would have a massive indirect impact, because we could be getting decent players in for decent money, and not just whoever is on, in Brendan's phone. The agents that phone us at the last minute because their boy's looking a deal. and that might work to an extent, but that is not how a trading club should be run. We're supposed to be a trading club, are we not? So therefore, what's the size of our football department? It's almost non-existent at the moment. That is a farce. That is a farce, especially for a club that is sitting on so much money. And that money doesn't impact, as I say, the financial sustainability. We could be dealing with that right now. We could have dealt with that last year. And to say, oh, the manager doesn't like it. Well, the manager, if the manager doesn't like it, he just needs to tell his director of football or whoever. He's going to have final say anyway on the signings. He just says, no, they're not for me. And let's try and get on the same page about the quality that we need. But I mean, how many times have we said we need a proper football department so that when the manager leaves, that we have some sort of continuity. We've got no continuity at the moment, and not only that, we don't even have a football department. It's just, look, if you want to get down on it, it's an easy thing to do. There are a lot of structural issues in the club that have not been addressed for a long, long time, and they show no sign of being addressed at the moment, despite these ridiculous interim results, which are going to come out, and we're going to have a bigger mountain of gold. To do what with? It's not. Is it need to build a new stadium? But we've got enough money to start and could make a good starting one.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of. I think Brendan and Michael Nicholson need to be aware, and I'm sure they are, of how this is going to be perceived if we take this team that could be sensational and do nothing with it, and in fact make it weaker.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more, John. I think there is going to come a point of no return for this window in this summer, and I think it will be in the days just prior to the window ending, because I think even if you bring in players right at the end of the window, there's the optics around it are going to look more like desperation rather than well thought out, well structured recruitment process that has been built from the ground up and has all the requisite moving parts. I think it looks like desperation, and you're right, it will smack of they've picked up the phone to the old tried and tested agents and said, right, we need this, what have you got? And it doesn't, to me, it doesn't provide that confidence to the supporters that actually we have a well-run, smooth, well-oiled process. We've got a fly-by-the-seat-of-the-pants process that we just can't seem to, for whatever reason, get past. And you talked about personnel. I mean, at what point last season did we get rid of Mark Lowell and Joe Dudgeon? It was well before the season ended. Oh, yeah. So not only are we dragging our heels on signing players, we're dragging our heels on replacing, despite their obvious poor performance, but replacing key background personnel. It's
but there was nothing the matter. There was nothing the matter with the idea. The problem was with the personnel. And as I said that last week, the idea is absolutely fine, but you just you get the chairman's boy in, and I mean, do me a favour, I mean, that was so obviously never going to work, I'm just surprised he sacked him. I'm still surprised he sacked him.
Yeah, well, if or whether the decision was taken out of his hands, we don't know. But yeah, I mean, surely someone's having a word in the chairman's ear, the CEO's ear, and saying, look, he might be the most qualified person for this job, but optically, it's going to look bad. So no, steer clear, go for the next.
I mean, it looks terrible, and it's the same issue with Lowell Senior, right? Because regardless of the fact, we said at the time, bringing him back was a terrible idea by all standards of corporate governance. Bringing the former CEO back is a terrible idea because he brings with him the same culture that you just tried to get rid of.
Yep.
And the former CEO was a former subordinate. Sorry, the current CEO was a former subordinate of his, which means that it makes him extremely uncomfortable. And there is reporting to that effect that he is really uncomfortable having Lowell Senior in the building. Desmond wanted Lowell Senior there for a different reason, but he's the fact he's in the building is an issue. And people talk about he doesn't have, I don't believe he has day-to-day control of anything. But the problem is not the influence he has in the boardroom, it's the influence he has in the corridors, right?
Yeah.
So who's he talking to? What word does he have? And, just, here's a wee by the by, and, and people aren't going to, confront him or move away from him because, obviously he is basically embedded there at the moment. You'd be easier moving one of the stands than you would be, moving Lowell. So it's a real problem. I feel sorry for the CEO in that respect, but they should never have brought him back. Obviously, the CEO couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
He should never have been brought back. And the end result of that is we've made a number of bad decisions there. So you look at, for instance, we're saying he doesn't have, he doesn't have control of the transfer window, because I think that's a wee bit paranoid. But a lot of people believe that, his influence is pervasive, and you have to agree that it's slightly pervasive, because the man comes back and all of a sudden then his son is the best option we have for the football department. So are we saying that, because there's the argument that either has no influence is what we're told, but how did his son get that job? He just happened to be the best guy for the job. He didn't do that job at Manchester City. We had this discussion. He was in a completely different job. He was basically collating reports from around the world of all the scouts that they have, which we don't have, right? And he was passing them on to people who were qualified to determine whether those players were decent players or not. That was not what we were asking him to do. We were asking him to do a completely different job. And he did it very badly. And I think that, he probably took his dad's lead and they pitched it. They pitched it to the board on the basis that I have all this information from Manchester City. I can find you diamonds for peanuts. I'm going to find you a whole load of guys under 23, less than 15 grand in wages. They're all going to be diamonds. This is why you need to give me this job. And he'll have done that with his dad's blessing, because his dad knows what the board wants to hear, and he would have primed the board to be prepared to hear that, right? Because as a trading club, that is the perfect scenario. But it's not reality. It's not reality for any club in the world. No. It's just not as simple as that. Having a big load of information that you took with you from Man City, it doesn't make that happen. Certainly. I mean, look at the kind of youth team players that the likes of Man City are signing. These guys are, 3 or 4 times what we would pay for. If we had a striker available at 20 million and we knew he would get us to a European final, I seriously doubt that we would sign him. But the likes of your Man Cities would sign a 16-year-old for 20 million.
No.
So bringing that sort of information to us doesn't help, which is why, again, Brendan was at a disadvantage as opposed to Ange, because he'd been down in England too long, and most of his connections are irrelevant to us, because
they're in a market we can't.
It's a market we can't play in. So it's a completely different ball game. And look, I don't want this to be perceived as being super negative, but again, the history tells us that this isn't going to end as well as we hope it will. No. We've been disappointed enough times to know. I'm trying not to get my hopes up. As I say, I'm no longer optimistic, but I mean, we could do really well. We could be really good. If we keep Matt O'Reilly, ideal scenario, we keep O'Reilly, we build on it, and we could be really, really good this season. And then you take the flip side of that is not good. So flip side of that is we lose O'Reilly to death, don't replace him, don't fill any of the gaps, or just put the stopgap loan signings in, and all of a sudden the season goes from potentially really, really establishing ourselves in Europe and taking a first step towards doing that, and stepping up a level as a club, because we've got all this money now. We can step up a level. All this argument about wages, as I say, for the financial sustainability rules and stuff like that, we're nowhere near it. We're not even close to it. We're not even, we're not touching the sides of it. So we could do a huge amount more than we are currently doing, and we need to. I think for the people whose comments I cannot see, and I'm hoping I'm agreeing with me, that we need to do better.
Yeah, and listen, John, I get it, and it's very difficult to, and you know, this is why it seems strange. You know, we are playing good football already. We've started the season well. We've had a great pre-season, and yet, even amidst all the positivity that we can reference and have referenced actually on the channel and on the playing side, you know, we do have a good manager. We've got a manager who has managed at the elite level. We've got, you know, we've managed to, at this point in time, keep a hold of who I would see as the kind of spine of the team, you know, all the way from Kyogo to bring in again what I think is a really top goalkeeper in Kasper Schmeichel. But yet, it's the failure to deliver on so much promise when it comes to really enhancing the team. It's not entitled, it's not spoiled, maybe a little spoiled, but it's not full spoiled. But it's the frustration, because we've got fans who invest not only huge sums of money, but they invest emotionally, they invest their time, they invest their family's time in the club. And it is, you know, amidst all the negativity throughout the country that we've seen over the course of the weekend, and all the division and all the argument protests, Celtic's something that, you know, 99.9% of our Celtic community, we want the club to succeed. We do. We want the club to succeed. We want to go on. We want to have something that collectively we can all get behind. And it feels as though through factors that we have no control or no visibility of, that it's not going to happen. And yet we still get ourselves built up in the hope and the expectation that it will. I'll just bring in a few last comments. Brian Harkin, thank you very, very much indeed for supporting the channel. Brian's view is that the board won't sack Brendan. They'll try and make him walk and he'll pay zero compensation. Kind of fits into the mode of today's theme, I think. Paddy, I did apologise. I know it wasn't Jerry's fault, but as you know, everything that goes wrong on this channel is Jerry Taylor's fault to some degree. So it wasn't just me. I thought this was a great point from David Boyle. It's a watershed season. Failing to back the manager and meet the supporters' expectations in this transfer window, David feels will cause a breakdown in relations that will not be undone. And I think we've touched on that, and I would certainly agree. And CJ sums it up. You know, reports of our earnings should be good news, and it should under normal circumstances, under circumstances probably any other club. I mean, you imagine how this would be received across the water, right? Across the other side of the city. You know, it should be good news, but it just adds to our frustration, and we're getting sick of it now. And I think that's unfortunately a bit of a negative to end on. However, let's end on a positive. We're already 2 points clear in the league. It doesn't look as though our nearest rivals are anywhere near the level we compete with us, but we'll never have a better opportunity to move away. Listen, all that remains to say is thank you very much indeed for everyone that's commented and contributed today. Hopefully, as we go over the next few days, we'll start to get some movement in the transfer window and we can really get our teeth into that. But until that happens, we'll try and address some of the issues that everyone speaks, is raising and speaking about. So thanks for sticking with us. Apologies if that was a bit negative, but it certainly went quick. I quite enjoyed listening to John, as I always do. So John, thank you very much indeed for joining me today, sir. It's always a pleasure. Thank you to everyone that's joined and tuned in today. This has been the Wednesday Celtic State of Mind Bulletin. Thanks everyone.